I'm very happy to give the floor to Hiwa Asadpour, who will deliver today a lecture on cross-dialectal diversity in Kurdish varieties of Northwestern Iran. Thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope it will be a very interesting discussion afterwards. We can start, Hiwa, please.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria, for inviting me, and thanks for everybody joining me in this presentation. Before I start, I would like to switch off my camera during the presentation. Since I'm going to share my screen, I would like to enhance my CPU storage as well as my internet connection. So I would like now to share my presentation with you.
Aram, kindly help Hiwa.
I have a problem with sharing, kind of. I think you shall now see my slide, yes?
Oh, yes, it's on the screen.
Okay. Just I'm going to take this off. Yeah, okay. Today, I want to present a survey of some linguistic features in several Kurdish varieties with a focus on Mukri in northwestern Iran. In the next slides, I will introduce the term Kurdish, and I will illustrate a map of Kurdish populated region. But what is Kurdish, and where are the Kurdish dwellers resident? Kurdish is a term applied to a group of varieties which are quite different linguistically. With respect to Kurdish, it is hard to answer the question of what constitutes a language and what constitutes a dialect in an absolute way. The colorful areas show roughly regions where the Kurds are dwelling. The map is just an estimation, and it is not representing a closer linguistic boundaries. So this is just to show where are the Kurds dwelling, basically. So you see different spots in different geographical areas. Due to the difficulty of defining what is Kurdish, there is no, unfortunately, reliable language mapping of Kurdish that would illustrate the genetic relationship among Kurdish varieties. Therefore, I will use the term Kurdish as an ethnic rather than linguistic. So here, whatever I call it in an ethnic way rather than a linguistic definition. And we will go through the whole procedure why. In line with the speaker's ethnic Kurdish identity, and that stretches across several linguistic varieties. So here also in the central part of Iran, there are some spots of Kurdish that they are dwelling, but they are not listed in the literature. But during my field work, I just took a note of those cases as well. This is a map of Iran. And this, the northwestern part of Iran is called Azerbaijan Gharbi. In southern areas of Azerbaijan Gharbi is called Mukrian region, which on the right side of the slide, you see Mukrian region. So Mukri Kurdish is a group of distinct but distantly related dialects, classified collectively as a variety of Sorani Kurdish or Central Kurdish. The affiliation of Sorani or Central Kurdish within the general grouping of Kurdish still is a matter of ongoing scientific debate. Mukri is a little studied variety with no previous research of its dialectal variation. The most recent work goes to Oppingen, 2016, which he studied cliticization of this language variety for his PhD dissertation. In this slide, I present the geographical distributed directions of Mukrian region. And we will need these orientations through the presentation, like northwest, southeast. So whenever I'm talking about west, I'm going to point out to this direction that currently I'm showing on the slide, or east, or north, or south. But what are the objectives of this study? In this presentation, I will present a mapping of 3 phonological features with a special focus on the specific dialectal boundaries. And then I will point out to outer boundaries of the language mapping which all will be established comparatively. But this study focuses mainly on the urban areas of Mukrian region. Further, I will give an overview of informants and their language attitude with respect to these 4 linguistic features, which are 3 phonological and 1 representative morphological feature. But the data and method. The data in this presentation include personal fieldwork in West and Northwest Iran, and the published data of Öpengin on Mukri dialect, Fatah on Southern Kurdish, Beleli on Leki and Southern Kurdish again, as well as the Manchester Kurdish database that recently has been uploaded, and I was also one of the field workers for this Kurdish database. The data include monologue narrative and conversational free speech, as well as questionnaire. And what will you see in the next slide? It is the extraction of frequencies of the corpus counting and like token counting of the existing corpora. The first feature which I'm going to talk about goes to pharyngeals, h and and versus ein versus h, and the glottal stop So in this slide, I first give you a few examples with their translation. On the left side, you see the Arabic form as well as their translation. And on the right side, you see the Kurdish forms of pharyngeals and those examples. And then I will map them on geography based on some estimation. And note that these glosses in the next slide do not represent a precise boundary, because it will need really comprehensive fieldwork, including each single village and town in the region. However, I will capture a general overview. In this slide, I present that the pharyngeal system of language varieties in Mukrian displays a fusion to some extent between 3 types of he type, as you see in the yellow box, for example, like Haris, earth, or A type, the blue box. Again, it is the same, Aris, earth, or the E type, like Aris. And the glottal stop is like the feature, like the pronunciation. It is emerging as a recent phenomenon, basically. Such a distinction is mainly due to the geographical position that's straddling between west of Mukri, as you see in the box, and East Mukri. On the right side in blue, it is Ae. And this red line, this red line box shows actually the isogloss bundle between these 2 main regions of He and Ae. Regional variation plays an important role in the choice between these 2 He and Ae forms. And in West Mukri, for instance, in Sardasht area and Piranshar in the red circle, and parts of central Mukri of Mahabad, close to the like on the right side of the red circle, to the southern areas of Rabat and Nalans, they speak mostly He form. Moreover, in South Mukri, for instance, in Bana, the He is also preferred over Ae, and in Saqqas, the Ae, and mostly in Saqqas area, it is E form over He form. They are like basically common. Saqqas is almost like an Ardalan area, whereas Ardalan area, basically, if you see the mouse here in these southern areas below the blue lines, there it is Ardalani area, and up to here basically Saqqas. If you look at my mouse, you will see the position. And but parts of Saqqas which are in contact, basically here nearby Bokan, in these areas they share the both phonemes of A and E. In general, a recent tendency overall in the whole area, in central as well as East Mukri, it is the replacement of He and A by E. Basically, the yellow and the blue boxes are replaced by mostly the green one, which is the educated form, and which it can be probably due to contact with Persian. With respect to language attitude of the informants in my fieldwork, I noted some which are interesting, like I present one or two cases. For example, some of the literate informants of mine in the central areas of Mukrian, as you see the red line, especially Mahabat, they laughed at those who were pronouncing the he form, and they said that they didn't understand why the people in West pronounce he, where it would be natural to pronounce as ae. Making fun of the other regions regarding their pronunciation, basically it shows that the informants consider their language as standard, correct, and more prestigious form. On the other hand, the illiterate informants consider the he form as a non-Mahabadi form. They did not make any judgment regarding the choice between he and nae forms. Although the literate informants that they preferred the form, as I formerly mentioned, those educated ones, they preferred the form over and he, which they considered as to be more correct, and the other two forms to be incorrect. This can be due to influence of Persian, as I mentioned, because Persian is the language of education, media, and it is also lingua franca, and it is also substitute form of the Arabic forms of he and nae. In general, whenever a word in East Mukri is pronounced with he, then in West Mukri it is pronounced as ae. So if, for example, we consider the black box, and if any word is pronounced as he in the blue box area, it is pronounced as ae, and vice versa. Let's go a little bit further beyond this region. In Iraqi Kurdistan, as we see here in this slide, the black box is bigger in Hawler, Rania, and Qaladze. So you see Hawler, it is Arbil, so the official pronunciation, and Hawler is the local one. And up to basically northern areas of this region, it shows similar features to West Mukri. So we see that part of Iran and part of Iraq, they are in one isogloss. However, if we go a little bit further to south and to the east, we see that Slemania, together with Saqqas and Sanandaj, they show a different patterns in comparison to Mahabad and Bokan. Whereas Slemania, it is also written in Sulaimaniya, as Sulaimaniya. Basically, it is between the two isogloss of blue one and the black one, and this variety shows similar features to East Mukri. As if you remember, East Mukri goes to Saqqas Bokan area, and the blue box, it shows that bundle feature between all of these regions. So close to the borders of Mukrian region, basically the speakers, they show more similarity with Sulaimaniya speakers. With respect to language attitude, the Sulaimaniya literate informants, they stated that, I just narrated directly, we don't know why those languages are flawed. The correct form is a. The illiterate Sulaimaniya informant said that h and a do not exist in our language, but they are typically of somewhere in north, like Hawler, Arbil, or in Iran. According to the Sulaimaniya variety, this perception cannot be correct because in this language variety, all the expressed forms exist. Farther north to Arbil and Rani and Qaladze area, in the black box area, like the cotted lines, the informants, they recognize similarities and differences with Iranian and other Iraqi neighbors without any judgment. So we see now the blue box, they consistently judge the others, while the black one, they really didn't. And they just tried to show the different types of forms. Furthermore, in northern areas of Mukri, where the northern Kurdish dialects start, like in Shno and Urmia region, basically I think you all at least aware of the Urmia region, if not Shno. Shno, it's basically Nagada, Shno on top of the map. Here, specifically, as we see in the slide, that there is a phenomenon, for example, in contact with Mukri, Northern Kurdish, known as Kurmanji, dialects, also they present similar behaviors and characteristics. For example, in Shikaki, a northeastern variety, they pronounce mar as mahr. So they use the h form. And if we go a little bit, and another example is like Jathra, Jahra, Jahri. It means poison. This is another example. And if we go further to the north, in Jalali Maku area, which is also close to the borders of Armenia, they pronounce mar or mahr in Shikaki as ma'ar. So basically they pronounce it as ma'ar as snake and ja'ar poison. So these forms are common in the far northern areas. In these examples, we see that mar, ma'ar, and jar and ja'ar seem to suggest a dissimulation of the old form of which it could be a generalization of cases like Jathra in Old Persian, Jahr and Jar in some more recent dialects of Mukri, and to Ja'ar in some others. Therefore, the old still it's kind of affected. In the next slide, I will give a more general isoglossive mapping of pharyngeals in Kurdish varieties. Sorry, I didn't show you the Ja'ar form. So you see now the Ja'ar poison. So what I'm going to show you here, I classify the Kurdish varieties into A type, the northern areas, which it is known as Kurmanji. A type, the glottal stop type, more in the southern to the northeastern varieties of northeast Iran, and the mixed form of Mukri area, which it has a combination of all. So if you have any question, please feel free just to unmute yourself and ask if there is something unclear, or if you have anything more to be cleared up. Otherwise, I continue with palatalization, and still in the discussion, we can discuss the topics again. The second feature, which I'm going to present, the isoglosses and the distribution of the feature, is palatalization. Again, I show you the geographical map of the region. This is a map of the region with concentrating on Mukrian region or Mukri region first. I consider 4 stages of palatalization of velar stops, K and G. So the first stage is zero palatalization, and it goes all into the southern areas. And also it includes Suleymania. And the second one goes to the form of, I shall also pronounce the examples for you. For example, Keu or Gej. Keu, it means mountain, and Gej, it is desert. This stage is extended to Suleymania in the red circle in Iraqi Kurdistan, and in Suleymania speakers also in Iraqi Kurdistan, they greatly depend on the contact of the informants, basically. Like if they have contact with the speech communities and areas of Iran or the other sides, they show these type of features, forms. And those informants who had little or no contact with areas, for example, that they have palatalization in common, they showed preference for non-palatalized forms of what we see here as K and G. Meanwhile, those who were in contact with the informants who have palatalized forms, they use palatalized and non-palatalized forms interchangeably. So if there was a Suleymani informant that I was interviewing and they were in contact with those places that they had palatalized forms, they were like interchangeably, they were switching between different types of forms. And moreover, during recent years, the education and media, they are using these non-palatalized forms of K and G as standard forms. So this is the kind of approach that nowadays media is heading up, and the the people, they are hearing more of these forms. The second stage, it is the post-alveolar affricates of che, che, ge. For example, cheo, mountain, jej, dizzy. At stage 2, there is a steep fronting of the velar stops ke and ge, and a shift from zero palatalization to post-alveolar affricates che and ge. This phenomenon occurs in both loan words and native words. The third stage is further fronting of post-alveolar affricates che, je, or je. For example, cheo, mountain, jej. So basically, in this stage, the people, they nicely pronounce the palatalized forms. And finally, which a more radical form is the fourth stage, and it is a fronting of fully palatalized forms that is post-velar stops, like te, te. I think you heard a lot among the Kurmanji speakers, and you also heard in Armenian, also possibly in Georgian and the Caucasus area, also other varieties of northern areas, that you hear this form a lot. And in the last stage, the palatalized phonemes move forward. For instance, teo, mountain, diz, dizzy, which occurs further west to Iraqi borders, including Erbil, and surrounding up to northwest Mukri in the villages around Piranshah. And Piranshah basically here. If you see my mouse, it is between stage 2 and 4. And the stage 4, that is the post-velar stop T and D, basically it is more common in Piranshah and Sardasht. So these areas, if you travel in these areas, you will hear a lot of T and D towards the Iraqi Kurdistan, basically. Especially this is radical in Hawler and in Koya and in Raniye, Khaladze, and these areas, basically, the red line, the red dots. The general typology would be basically TZ type in northern areas, and the KG type in southern areas, J type in central Iran areas, and a mix of KG and KG in northeastern varieties in Khorasan, Kuchan, and finally, again, we have a mixed form of Mukrian region, which is a buffer zone of northern and southern areas. So in this, like dotted red lines, we hear a lot of different types of these forms that so far I discussed. So far I presented 2 forms. Now, the third phonological form, which I'm going to present, goes to dark L, lo, light L, like le, and the flap R, like re. Again, I'm showing you the map of the region. The instability of dark L and light le and the flap re is another distinctive feature in Mukri and the outlier dialects. As an example, here we see dil, which means heart. So in Persian, it is qalb. I think most of you heard about qalb. And dil, it is one of the common forms. As you see, the isogloss shows a wide area pronouncing the dark L form. And it is distributed all in east, central, north, and south to the west of Mukri and Sardash, Piranshah, and Shno areas. And in West Mukri, here, the new dotted lines, the purple-violet one, the field records from Nalaz, Sardash, and small pockets of villages in the mountainous areas indicate the existing of other 2 forms of light L and Re forms. For example, they would say Dil or Dir. So in this area, we hear this type of form a lot, but it is archaic form and mostly in villages, the people they are pronounced it. And this is the isoglossive delight dil. So far we have 3: do, dir, dil. They are all encountered in, like the dil form, encountered in Badinani region of Urmia district to the Iraqi Badinani, and the transition from el, dil to le, dil happens in the areas between west and central, and the transition is basically from the consonant cluster of rd, rd to l, and then to le, and the rd form again to re, and then to r. That starts from the last area in the West Mukri region, and it continues to the Iraqi Kurdistan, the regions around Erbil, Khoi, Jarawa, Sangaser, and the neighboring areas. So these areas that I named, all it includes in these blue lines. Basically, the usage of the re form increases in Iraqi Kurdistan. So as we see, the purple area, it increases going to the east, far to North Iraq, to the borders of Turkey. The dil form, dil, is more common among the informants who are in contact with West Mukri. An interesting observation is the old form of zir. This is highly peculiar because this is quite old in terms of the form, which still is existing, but pretty rare. And I'm not sure if still after like 10 years of my fieldwork, still there are remnants of this form or not. But you see that how the dialectological description observations can really help to extract all forms and archaic forms from more synchronic dialects, and how these dialects can help us, our understanding of the whole procedure of development of a certain forms. Basically, with respect to these forms, in the West Mukri region, the informants consider the le and re form, for example, dil or dir, as a different forms that pronounce in a funny accent. But of course, they had it expressed positively, and some also with some negative connotations. They refer to such a speech as a rural accent. So though was more prestigious, educated, dil and dir were old-fashioned, low prestigious, but still it was kind of accepting for them, but not in an educated and prestigious way. Some informants even consider people who showed the reform, dir, they realized had to be primitive and uneducated, and they were mostly in central Mukri area that they were expressed such a kind of attitude. In general, in the regions where the le and re form of dil and dir forms prevail, the young educated generations were tended to qualify the le form. So they tried to change it, like those people that, for example, the new generations that they grew up with dil and dir form, they tried to use dil form because it was more prestigious and standard. In this slide, I distinguish northern varieties into L type, Le type, as you see in the northern areas, and also in Khorasan, in the northeastern areas of Iran, and the L form, as I showed it formerly. So far we have two types of Le and L form, and again, the mixed form of Le and L in Mukri area. So in Mukri area, we have this combination quite interchangeably and quite mixed. So far, I presented 3 phonological features. The number of isoglosses are more, of course, than what I presented, and but I presented the more detailed one in my forthcoming paper, which is going to be published in Linguistic Geography at Cambridge Press. Please feel free to contact me if you are interested to know more about other kinds of features and examples. I will end mapping of varieties with an example of a morphological feature, which is Esafa construction. So I want to show you how these different Kurdish varieties, they present Esafa construction. That could be also an interesting phenomenon, but of course this requires the whole morphological bunch of isoglosses requires further presentation. But here I just, for the purpose of an overview, I would like to show you to have a comparison between phonological and morphological differences. So morphological features like between Kurdish varieties also show a wide variety of variability and forms. In the northern areas, as we see in the boxes, the orange, the light yellow boxes, the northern Kurdish, they use izafa and oblique form. So look at the example, a house of king, Mali Pasha. So how do they pronounce it? They say Malaka Pashaya. Malaka Pashaya. So even in Khorasani area, they pronounce it the same. And with this oblique form, these varieties, they also present the gender. For example, here the Pasha is singular, and it is also masculine, which also they present the feminine one. As we see in the example of a house of king, also with respect to the next example, a is only used in Mukri area, and in some Shikaki forms that they just use the suffix a, and they didn't use the suffix ya at the end of the king, which is the singular masculine oblique. So the oblique in this Harki varieties of Urmi and Chenot regions, they show unstable characteristics, because some of Shikaki informants, they use Malika Pashaya. So they also have the ya form, but mostly the Badinani speakers, they have this stability in terms of ya at the end of the noun. More down to Mukri region, basically, in western areas, the oblique form is still common, and while in eastern, it is somehow lost. So I pronounce it for you. Khanweki Pashai, while in eastern areas they would say Maliki Pasha. So we see that Pashai and Pasha, the oblique form is not existing anymore. And in Mukri, like in West Mukri, the ye form, it has remnants of gender distinction. So sometimes it is properly indicated the gender, sometimes not. So it is quite unstable, which shows the oblique case here is in the process of change. In southern areas of Mukriyan, as well as Sana area to Suleymania, so they have the forms Yek Mali Pasha, which it is similar to East Mukri without the oblique form, and it is pretty stable in the stage. So as we see here, the East Mukri, Maliki Pasha, and Yek Mali Pasha, it is more or less similar. Just the difference here, it is ek and yek, which are two different indefinite markers, basically. Yek is the indefinite marker of one, and ek is the indefinite suffix, which is known to be indefinite marker. And finally, in the southern areas, the southern Kurdish varieties, they do not have an izafa marker, interestingly, and in some regions the marker is just a schwa, which can be dropped in many cases. For example, they would say Yekmal Patsha, Malag Patsha, or Malaga Patsha. So basically, this shwasa most of the time is dropped. And this requires, of course, further investigation. However, these isoglosses that I presented here for the izafa construction matches the Nina forms. Nina is abbreviation for Northeastern Neo-Aramaic. Aramaic is a Semitic language variety, similar to Hebrew and Arabic, and that the current isoglosses that I'm presenting, it matches perfectly the Nina isoglosses, and I'm talking about this based on Hiwa Asadpour 2016 conference presentation in Cambridge, and this matches pretty well. So the question is that what is the reason that we have such a similar mapping? Is it contact from Kurdish to a Semitic language, or is it the influence of a Semitic language into Kurdish? This is not the topic of this presentation. Just I want to highlight how language mapping can really help to understand the mechanisms of different forms of language varieties in a special area, especially if it is a multicultural and multilingual area. So based on this ISOF construction, I give 3 isoglossas: type 1, type 2, type 3. So type 1, the northern areas; type 2 would be in the middle; type 3 would be those forms that are without any isofe. And I distinguish these isoglosses with the violet dots as well as red and the black lines to show the isoglosses, basically boundaries between these forms. These were the 3 main phonological features and the isofe form. And now let us conclude what we learned from these isoglosses and these type of differences among Kurdish dialects. So first of all, I can distinguish 3 different language types as mentioned as type 1, type 2, and mixed type. So type 1, the orange one or the darker yellow in the northern areas, as well as Khorasan area in the northeastern Iran. And the mixed area is in between the northern and the southern areas. And the southern areas somehow shows in the northern, like in the nearby Caspian Sea Kurds, as well as central Iran, they show similar behaviors. And the mixed type, especially Mukrian region, this shows that these Kurdish varieties, they can be considered as a bridge between these type 1 and type 2 forms, and it is like a transition zone from changing between these 2 main varieties, basically. But if we look at precisely in this mixed type, which is like a bridge, again we see isoglosses, and again there is bridges. So basically this is a larger picture, and now I'm going to show you a more detailed isoglosses, that how we can distinguish different forms within this mixed type area. So in a closer look at this mixed type variety, the isogloss bundles and division fall into 4 main dialects. 1, West Mukri with high density in daily communication with the neighboring areas. 2, East Mukri with the least density of communication with others. 3, South Mukri with an average density in the communication with other regions and outsiders. 4, Central Mukri. Based on these features that I presented and several other more, I can conclude that the most divergent region is the area between West and East Mukri, basically here. This is an area shared between Sardash, Piranshar, Nagada. So we see that we have this bundle quite complex here, and this can be also the next smaller bridge and the transition zone even within the buffer zone of Mukrian region. In central Mukri, the violet basically line, it is highly important for the people to know who they are in contact with and which tribe they are communicating with. Who are their best friends, who they are sharing labor and agricultural apparatus with. Such a views assign direction to people's social communication, and it also structures their residential communities. At the local level, villages and all sizes are different from the respective neighbors in many respects, and they are divergent from each other, basically. In a larger area, they overlap with each other and make up a uniform region, basically. If we combine all of these isoglosses, they make one unified area, but of course in details they are really different. In general, in all linguistic levels, mutual intelligibility exists, of course, although in many cases the lexicon and the individual linguistic features may show differences. That would be due to migration, interreligious communication, or the ritual ceremonies, and intermarriages as well. For example, most men traveling between the regions of West Mukri and neighboring Iraqi cities, so between Sardasht and Arbil and Ranieh. So there are a lot of communication and transportation between these cities. And the people, for example, in West Mukri, they use their native variety at home and with their relatives, while in work they meet outsiders and they do trade and business. They have the regional varieties that they use. So basically with outsiders, they don't speak exactly what they speak at home. Among all the other Mukri varieties, West Mukri speakers adopt to other Mukri varieties of Central, East, and South more easily, mainly to the Eastern, like in Balkan. For example, there is more close unity between Balkan and Sardash, so that would be mainly due to communication or any other reason. Also, in East Mukri speakers, they are the second group they interchangeably use their locals. So East Mukri is this black dotted lines, and they use regional dialects with outsiders that they encounter. And the only exception is Central Mukri Mahabat. So basically you see that the blue one, this is very special and unique because both male and female speakers are resistant to adopt the accent of other areas of West, Southern, and East, at home, at outside, with locals, or with anyone else. And that made kind of unique features in this area that is totally different from the others. Yeah, so that was my presentation. And this is my last line of isogloss. So basically the bridge and the transition zone starts from here to the Badinani of Nagadashno and Mukri and Northern Kurdish area. Yeah, thank you so much. That was my presentation.
Thank you so much, Hiwa. I wonder if there are questions or maybe comments. Yes, please, but switch on your microphone.
Thank you, Hiwa. Unfortunately, I missed the first part of your presentation. I came just when you were discussing the isogloss concerning the l, r, etc.
Yeah.
Just two questions.
Yes, sure.
One is that in most Kurdish dialects, it is l is one of the conspicuous isoglosses for all Kurdish dialects.
Yes.
Kurdish, being a Northwestern Iranian dialects, should have preserved raz as other Northwestern Iranian, but Kurdish aligned with the Southwestern group. Yeah. So this is Kurdish shares with Southwestern, so Persic dialects. So, but Rida gives l always in most cases in Northern dialects, Southern dialects, but not and ra, of course, as you said, not through ra, but this you mentioned in part of I forgot what is the part with this peculiarity der, for instance,
yeah,
as art. This ra comes not from ra but from l. So ra gives always l in Kurdish, not ra. And even in the dialects or subdialects or groups of dialects where it is ra, then this ra comes from l.
Yeah,
this is the first step.
I think with respect to this point,
this is a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned also zir.
Yes.
As far as I know, no Kurdish dialect has preserved this lexeme.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, zir we have only in Zaza.
Well, I mentioned an area which basically I have data because I have done field work, and there are like mountainous areas that those people that there are few random people that they are not in contact with others, basically. So this is quite rare, as I mentioned, and this is not existing in other varieties. And it is only a very limited area between Sardash and Piranshar, basically. So if you travel there, you will.
So
You have
they use
the
zir.
mountain. Yeah.
They use zir, yeah,
Zir, yes,
for
yes.
art.
No, zir.
Oh, it's a very amazing fact.
Yes.
It's very interesting, at least.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this was
Yeah.
quite interesting for me because I didn't really understand first. I didn't really understand the zede because I expected to hear dir or dil. But then couple of times I asked the old lady, she said that zir, and then the other young generation, they made fun of her. And actually, for me, at that time, I was also not conscious about this feature. But step by step, I just realized that this is really zir and it is very unique.
But probably maybe Hiwa, this is not zir meaning heart, but it is zir which means spirit. In several Iranian dialects, this zir means spirit, figure, and it is applied to the somehow roguish people or the very hard people. They say zirra, zir. For instance, in Talishi we have zir, and in Kurdish we have zir. Even in Kurmanji we have zir. I'm division of zirra. Kuraki zir, zir. It means vigorous. Probably this must be that zir, or not?
Well, that is, I think, then the R is somehow different because there is the difference between zir, zr. So because we have also zrimtu. So you see that it is like my heart went because I was afraid, then zrimtu. So this is a very common expression almost in the entire West, in Sardash and Piranshah area, basically.
So this is interesting fact. It is if it is true, then it should be a very interesting finding. A very interesting finding. Also, just came into my mind. So if you now probably you know that in Kurmanji, for mountain, we have now chev or chev or chev. We have only g for mountain.
You mean with respect to palatalization, yes?
And chev. In Kurmanji we have g only. G. What is G-blend?
Well, there is a difference between Kurmanji because there are different types, Badinani, Shikaki, Herki, Kurmanji, and they are really, like Badinani is very distinctive from Kurmanji, so we shall make this distinction. And I'm pointing out to Badinani basically for, yeah.
No, Badinani is a Kurmanji dialect. Basically.
Yes, I mean, in general sense, yes, of course.
Yeah, and then I thought probably this chi. Generally, we consider this chi as coming from Iranian Chakata.
Yeah.
Chakata, which means forefront, for instance, in Armenian, you know. Chakata.
Here you mean poison, you mean?
We have a person, Chaga, in middle person, Chakat, etc. In Talishi, we have Chakuda. It means the top of the mountain. So, probably in Kurmanji, Chi comes also from Chev with the loss of dropping of final word.
I think
it would be an interesting. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think with respect to the fronting, basically, there are mostly those Badinani which they have a mix of Mukri or Central Kurdish and Kurmanji. So it is kind of transitioning between these two forms, and it is so unstable that they pronounce it quite frequently, the fronting forms, you know. Otherwise, in the far northern areas in Turkey, to the northern areas, they don't pronounce it that way, basically.
Okay, the last just question about the Izafe construction. You said Malaka Pashaya, yeah?
Yeah.
Malaka Pashaya with indefinite article ka, and Pasha. But this ya, this is a verbal form. Malaka Pasha, it is the house of Pasha.
Yes, yeah.
Not you said house of Pasha, but ya is just a verbal form, third singular.
Yes, but there is one thing, that the ya can be a copula, so it can also move. For example, before like Malaka ye Pasha, and it can like it is movable. But then it is the issue because it is like also oblique. Here it is just a house of king. If we even delete the ak form and just to say Mala Pashaya, basically this is the oblique form. So because in the Kurmanji areas they don't have like the without oblique in the northern areas. So this is a typical form that the izafa can be also the oblique form. Sorry, copula. And it can also present as a verb, like it is the house of the king.
Yes, for instance, I would say in Kurmanji, for instance, for my Kurmanji,
yes,
I would say Mala Pashe.
Yeah, this is another
Pashe,
form. Yes.
Pashe is an oblique form of Pasha.
Yeah. So the form that I presented, it is Badinani Kurmanji that I presented, basically.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Hiwa.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks a lot for these nice, like basically comments that quite brilliant and in terms of highlighting those features. This is really a wide variety of forms that one can discuss about all of each of these individual varieties. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Anybody else has any questions?
Hello?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Hiwa, for your interesting, very well studied presentation. Although this is not completely my field, but from my understanding, I had one question regarding your English word and the equivalent in the different dialects. I didn't quite understand the English sentence that you mentioned regarding a house of king. Now, a house of king in that sentence, do you mean the king's house or one of the king's houses?
Okay.
Or I didn't quite understand whether this is the possessive. For example, the Kurdish Malaki Pasha. Again, this is definite or indefinite. Mali Pasha. In that case, if it is Mali Pasha in Sorani, it's the king's house. I don't think the possessive of using the preposition of works in that case. Or I am ignorant, and I apologize for this. And you can explain. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That was actually to the point. I didn't explain fully the izafa construction. So a house of king, basically it is the genitive construction, as we have in English, king's house, or we can also say like one of the houses, like one of the king's house. So in English, it can be with apostrophe s or with of. I presented this of form because in these forms that I presented, it exists. Also, there are a couple of other examples like Mali de Pachai. So this form is quite archaic in Mukri area. They say Mali de Pachai, but it doesn't exist in Slemani or in other forms. So first of all, this is the genitive construction, the king's house. And with respect to your question that is it one of the houses or several, the good point is that Kurdish uses the definite and indefinite suffixes, and that brings the function. This is not studied well yet, well studied. So I'm just telling you based on my own interpretation. So since it is ek and it is yek, which is mentioned here, it means that one of the houses of the king, the houses of the king or the king's house. So this is pointing out to one among, like it is impartative construction, among several others that the king may have. And the other, I don't think that in Kurdish we have other forms of the apostrophes s can be also like the izafa basically, so that it is attaching to mal, and then it connects pasha and mal together. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I can elaborate more on this topic.
Thank you very much. No, that's quite like interesting. It was just my understanding. A house of king didn't quite catch the meaning that I thought.
That house, it was just because of the partitive construction that it means one of the houses of the king. So it has genitive plus the contrast. And it is because in my data I had the indefinite marker. Therefore, I provided the translation as a house of king rather than king's house.
Thank you.
Well, I understand this Malaka Pashaya as one of the king's houses.
Yeah, correct.
One of the king's houses. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. It is totally true. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think Gohar has a question.
Yes, Gohar.
Yes.
No, I don't have questions. Sorry. Unfortunately, I missed the first and important part of your presentation. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Sorry.
And I joined when you were already concluding your presentation. Sorry. So.
I see.
I have a very short question, Hiwa. At the very beginning of your lecture, you mentioned that you, when in the context of your lecture, you mean Kurdish rather as ethnic definition or attribution than that applied to the dialectal varieties.
Yes.
Could you explain more in detail what would you mean?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Victoria. That is actually one of the very crucial questions, actually. An ongoing debate and discussion in the Iranian linguistics and Kurdish linguistics. So why I said ethnic and why I said based on identity. Basically, there are various types of definitions for Kurdish. It is, first of all, what is Kurdish, who defined Kurdish, and how this emerged, this term and the definition. Since it is so tricky, there are different kinds of definitions. It can be based on phonological. For example, these phonological features that I explained, like historical linguists, they classify languages like based on a, e, o differences, or like based on morphological differences, or syntactic. So like typologists, they are typologizing languages and they define a language based on the syntactic typology. And the more recent one with Lebov and sociolinguistic point of view, some they say, okay, we need to consider sociolinguistic aspects and to consider identity to define a language. Since it is so complicated, I considered to consider the definition at the moment for my presentation and for my study. If someone is a Turk but says that I'm a Kurd, but speaking like, of course, variety, which is known to be Kurdish, I consider this as to be a Kurdish variety, and for the purpose of this presentation, then to highlight the differences and similarities, to bring the isoglosses, to see that based on these ethnic similarities that the people are presenting about themselves, is it correct or not, and where we are, and how we can draw the isoglosses, and to define what is Kurdish and what is not Kurdish. I don't know if it is clear, or shall I explain a bit more? Because
so you mean is that the dialectal differences can be also approached as part of identity markers in terms of Kurdish, yes?
Well, yes and no. For example, with respect to dialectal differences, as I mentioned here in these isoglosses, I mentioned the language attitude that the people, some of them, they express this is not a language, this is not a dialect, and this is not Kurdish. So you see that it is similar in terms of form, but they express it differently. And that seems that the dialectal differences also present as attitude and ethnicity. And then some people, they totally ignore these differences, and they say, okay, regardless of any kind of difference that in syntactic, phonological level I do have, I am just a Kurd, I don't care. And this comes to a more political or sociological level, where the people, they find themselves with a group that it can be, for example, as a minority maybe mentality. I'm sure it is not religious, but somehow for some it is religious, but in general overview it is not. So these all can be distinctive in terms of dialectological linguistic definition of Kurdish, and that make it very difficult to define Kurdish as one language variety or several language variety or several dialects or varieties.
Thank you. For me, it's clear what you mean. I understand it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Anybody else would like to add something or maybe ask questions?
So I missed just the core of this discussion.
Yeah.
Victoria asked you about so you say dialectal differences can be some markers of identity for Kurds, or what?
Well, of course, yes, because it can be because, for example, as I mentioned, let me show you the last slide to show that I mentioned that the central Kurdish, for example, that it is Mahabad area, the people, they are resistant to other varieties. So they consider themselves as to be one unique, one specific dialect form, which is correct, prestigious, and this is the right language form, and this is Kurdish. While in other varieties, dialects, that they also present differences and similarities. The people, they adapt to the other one and they consider in between. For example, this blue line is kind of, okay, they say that this is our dialect and this is our form and we are special. So this is what the others, they have to follow us. And if they don't, then they are not part of this variety. And they are something, I don't know, uneducated or any other form.
So this is a normal, I think this is a normal phenomenon for all language areas, even in Persian, as you know, for instance, some peculiarities of a given Persian, even Persian patois or Persian variety. For instance, Khorasan is the main shibboleth, so linguistic shibboleth is, for instance, churuk, as you know. So they say for sparrow, they say churuk. So everyone who says churuk is a Khorasani. So having a Khorasani identity, and also for Isfahanis, this variety, and the marker of identity of Isfahanis is, for instance, ban, the long pronunciation of vowels, for instance, you know, and etc. So okay, thank you. This is yes, of course, it is true for Kurdish as well.
I think for Kurdish, it is much radical because Kurdish is not like Persian standard and like, you know, it is not defined. So it is much more complicated in the sense.
Yes, I understand. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else would like to add something or ask anything? Well, if not, I would like to once more thank Hiwa Asadpour for his fascinating presentation. It was really very, very interesting and very topical, in my opinion. And I hope it's not the last time you join our series, and maybe you'll present some other aspects of your research. And we will be very glad to give you the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Да.
Сегодня пришел Ашот из нашего ЖЭКа.
Да, принес. Понял.
Он поймал чебацы.